basic InDesign overview. On the left hand side you've got your toolbar, and you might have it double tooled or single, but there's all your tools down here, and I'll go over some of those in this video. On the right hand side we've got the panel, and I've set this panel up with just tools that I'll need, but if they ever happen to disappear, say you accidentally do that, you can bring that back by selecting Reset Typography. If you're on Essentials, you will want to switch to Typography, so you get all those panels down the right hand side when you reset it. Now you won't use all of them, but you can just leave them there. They're not going to make any difference whether you leave them there or not. Once you get more comfortable with them and start to know what they represent, you can give yourself more space by moving that across to the right. I'm going to leave it out like this here so you can see what it is that I'm clicking on as I say it. Now I'm going to create a new document, and through this process here, for some odd reason, I've got mine set up in this weird print setting where it works in picos instead of millimeters. But that's alright, because I'm going to type everything in millimeters anyway. It's going to get converted back to this weird number format with a P in the middle of it, but yours shouldn't. Now, from the top down, I do want to set this to print. I want to make sure that it's at print, so that means that when it prints out the printer, it's going to print at a higher resolution. Number of pages are going to be 1, starting page is going to be 1, and my page size is going to be A4. Yours should hopefully default to A4. The width and the height I'll leave. Your width will probably be 20.1 and your height will be 29.7 or something close to that. And I'm going to leave it at portrait for now. Now what I'm going to do from here is make 3 different columns, and I'll just leave the gutter as the default. And the margins can stay as they are. They'll be 12.7 for you. And then lastly, the bleed, which I'm going to put as 5 millimeters, actually 3 millimeters, around each of them. You'll notice when I click on another one to put it in, it's already changed it. Yours will, when you type in 3 millimeters in the first one, it'll change to 3 millimeters across. We don't need any slug on our document. And then click OK. Now what you're going to get here is a document that looks very similar to this. And just to go over it, we've got these purpley pink lines. They're your margins. You should never put text that you want people to read, unless it's a big title that you're doing it stylistically. You should never put your text outside of this margin that we've set up. These little bits here are the column gutters. You should never put your text inside those areas there. The black line is the page. Once again, you don't ever want to put text outside of that page unless it's for stylistic purposes, but in most cases you'll want to keep the text inside that purple margin. Lastly, we've got the red line. This is the bleed area. And I may have explained it in class, but if you take this to a commercial printer, their A4 paper is actually a bit bigger than A4. And they just print right over the edges of it and then trim it up to the proper size. That way, if you want a picture to go right to the edge of the page, it's not going to get a big thin little white line down there. So what we're going to do first is just work with some images. So we're going to place an image in. So to place an image, it's File and then Place. And in the Year 10 folder, Year 10, InDesign, you can pick one of these image concepts to go in. Now I'm going to pick this one here, and you'll see that it gives me the option to draw it gives me a little thumbnail, and I can then click and drag to draw where I want that image to go. Notice that I made it take up the whole page. I'm actually going to do that again, because if I want it to take up the whole page, I should draw to the bleed area. Like that. Now I don't actually want it to take the whole page. I really only want this picture of the car to be in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the frame, and I'm going to pull the frame down so that it crops it to this car. Now notice that I've done all of this with the selection tool, the black pointer. Okay, so what the black pointer does and you can get to it by hitting Escape or V. It allows you to move objects around the page. It allows you to change the size of a frame. And it also allows you to rotate a frame. If you hold Shift while you're rotating, it will make it at 45-degree increments. We don't want to rotate it though. Now, if I use this direct selection tool, there's a few things I can do with it. If I have the direct selection tool and I click on an object, you'll see that I get this brown box here. This actually lets me move the image around inside the frame. So say I want that city there now instead, which I might do. I might put the cityscape up there. I can use the brown box to resize the image, but as you can see, it squishes it. So if I want to scale it, I'm going to hold Shift and resize it. I don't need to resize this one though, because it actually fits from left to right quite well. The other thing I can do with this is if I just click over in the empty area, so I've got nothing selected, and then move over my object, it might be a bit hard to see depending on the resolution of this video, so I might zoom in. Actually, it doesn't make the box any bigger. But when I move into the corner of the blue box, a little tiny box appears. I can click that and actually change the shape of the frame. So the black tool will let you move it around, resize the frame. The white pointer tool will change the shape of the frame, but it will also allow you to move the contents of the frame around. And that's a very important distinction to make. So now I've just got a frame that's that big there with a city inside it. You can use this little disc thing that appears in the middle to move the contents of the frame around. So I might just bring that to there. And I might have the greenery in there, and then I'll bring up the top of the frame to touch the top of the image like that. At any time you can hit W to go into preview mode, but it's not recommended that you work in this because then you won't be able to see the bleed and you won't be able to see the margins. From here, I'm going to add a text box. The text box is the type tool and it's the T. Now this video might get cut short and you'll have to go on to the next one if the bell rings. So I'm going to draw a text box and I'm going to use these column guides. You'll see how my cursor looks like a box with a line through it here, and I put it there and it's got a little arrow in it, which means it's going to snap to that guide. So I'm going to put a guide here and I'm going to just type the word escape. It doesn't really matter what I type at the moment. Now with this text box selected, I want to change all the text in it. So I don't need to highlight the text like you do in Word. I'm just going to select the entire box and go to character. From character, I can change the font. Let's change it to something a bit better. And I can change the font size. Usually it would let me click those arrows. It doesn't seem to want to let me today. I can change the space between letters. So this one here is the space between letters, and this one is the space between lines, which isn't that helpful at the moment because I've only got one line. The other things down the bottom here I don't recommend that you use, and they will change the size of the actual text. They're not a good idea to use because the fonts have been designed specifically for or into what would you call it, proportion. And if you go chucking these numbers around here, you'll get weird looking fonts that look like this and they just look odd. So don't use those down there. If you want to change the style of the font, this little drop down box will let you. This one only has one style, light. So if it had bold or italic, it would let me change it in there. Under the paragraph tools, I can center it, I can right align it. So I'm going to right align this and bring it up to just touching the bottom of this image here. Now some of this stuff you'll have to do visually and you can use the arrow keys to move it. So that's pretty much touching the bottom of that if I hit W. Notice that the text does not go outside that margin on the right hand side. I don't want it to go outside the margin, I want it to stay within there. Because if this was a page, and I put it like this, it's going to look really odd when it's printed out. It might not if it was a poster, but if it was a page in a magazine, it would look quite strange. So I'm going to work with this here. Now changing color on this, and I'll be really quick on here, changing color on this is fairly simple. You're going to click swatches, and first of all you'll have to select the text by triple clicking in that box with the selection tool, and you can change the color of your text. Now the colors that come with InDesign, you'll notice there's only about 8 of them, and that's because these are the primary colors, and you can't select other colors because the printer may not be capable of doing them. So you actually have to mix your colors individually. From here, you should be able to, I don't want that pink color, but say I want to mix colors. We're going to do that in the next video, and we're going to set up some custom colors for our little poster here. I'll save this and we'll continue.